As the Ukraine conflict in 2021 entered its fifth and sixth days, the stakes grew higher, with escalating violence and mounting international pressure on the parties involved. These critical moments witnessed significant developments that shaped the course of the conflict and had lasting consequences for Ukraine, Russia, and the global community. In this article, we delve into the events of Day 5 and 6, shedding light on their impact and exploring the multifaceted dimensions of the conflict. Day 5, the Siege of Donetsk. On April 12, 2021, the conflict intensified further with the Siege of Donetsk, a major city in eastern Ukraine. Donetsk, a stronghold of pro-Russian separatists, became the focal point of a fierce battle as Ukrainian forces aimed to regain control of the city and establish a decisive advantage. Ukrainian troops, supported by international allies, launched a major offensive, employing both ground and aerial operations. The city endured heavy shelling, causing extensive damage to infrastructure and leading to civilian casualties. The pro-Russian separatists, determined to maintain their grip on Donetsk, fiercely resisted the Ukrainian advance. The battle for Donetsk lasted for several days, resulting in intense street-to-street combat and significant loss of life. The situation created a humanitarian crisis, with a large number of civilians trapped in the crossfire and facing a lack of access to basic necessities. Day 6, International Pressure and Peace Efforts. On April 13, 2021, as the conflict entered its sixth day, international pressure to de-escalate and find a peaceful resolution intensified. Various diplomatic initiatives and peace efforts were undertaken to bring an end to the hostilities. 1. Diplomatic channels and negotiations. Diplomatic channels remained active, with international leaders engaging in negotiations to find a way out of the crisis. Diplomats from Ukraine, Russia, and other concerned nations participated in talks and discussions aimed at reaching a ceasefire agreement. These efforts sought to create a conducive environment for dialogue and facilitate a path towards a sustainable resolution. 2. Humanitarian assistance. The dire humanitarian situation resulting from the conflict remained a pressing concern. International humanitarian organizations, alongside neighboring countries, continued to provide aid and support to the affected population. Efforts were made to establish safe corridors for the delivery of humanitarian supplies and the evacuation of civilians from conflict-affected areas. 3. Ceasefire attempts. Amid mounting international pressure, calls for an immediate ceasefire grew louder. The United Nations, regional organizations, and concerned nations reiterated the importance of a cessation of hostilities and the resumption of peaceful dialogue. These calls were aimed at preventing further loss of life and creating space for negotiations to find a lasting solution to the conflict. 4. Sanctions and economic consequences. The international community maintained its stance on imposing sanctions on Russia as a response to its involvement in the conflict. Additional economic and political measures were considered to increase pressure on Russia to de-escalate and engage in meaningful dialogue. These measures aimed to emphasize the consequences of continued aggression and the violation of Ukraine's sovereignty. Conclusion. Days 5 and 6 of the Ukraine conflict in 2021 brought further escalation and intensified international pressure on the parties involved. The Siege of Donetsk highlighted the determination of both sides to assert control over key territories, resulting in significant loss of life and widespread destruction. The global community's diplomatic efforts and calls for a ceasefire underscored the urgency of finding a peaceful resolution to the conflict. As the conflict continued, it became increasingly clear that a sustainable solution would require a combination of diplomatic negotiations, humanitarian assistance, and economic pressure on Russia. The events of these two critical days emphasized the need for a comprehensive approach that addresses the immediate humanitarian crisis while addressing the root causes of the conflict. The international community's continued engagement and resolve in finding a peaceful resolution will be crucial in bringing an end to the Ukraine conflict and ensuring stability and security in the region.